Hello, my name is Ivan Sergeyevsky. I'm going to analyze the case study in insulin overdose. To give you some background about this case, this involves a 78-year-old patient in a hospital who is experiencing abdominal pain at 3 a.m. At the time, a resident anesthesiologist is working at a different floor, caring to a different patient. He receives the call on his pager that there is a patient who is experiencing abdominal pain and he is asked to go check up on him. When he arrives, he sees that this patient is likely experiencing ischemic bowel symptoms. The attending physician also agrees and recommends that surgery be done. So they together get the preparation room ready and get consent from the patient's family. When they arrive at the operation room, the resident anesthesiologist receives lab results showing that the patient is experiencing high levels of potassium and increasing levels of creatinine, which are all signs pointing to liver deterioration. Attending physician directs the resident anesthesiologist to administer 10 units of insulin to the patient to counter these symptoms. The resident anesthesiologist counts out what he believes to be 10 units of insulin and administers it via IV to the patient. He then realizes that instead of measuring out 10 units of insulin, he actually measured out 10 cc's of insulin. And so 1 ccs equates to 100 units of insulin. So the resident anesthesiologist administered 1,000 units of insulin when he should have administered only 10. The case study mentions that even though he miscalculated and administered 1,000 units, the attending physician stabilizes the patient, and the patient continues with surgery, but later dies the next day out of general implications. So what went wrong during this process? Well, the case study mentions that they were working late at night. The resident anesthesiologist had already been working since the previous day. He had been fatigued. And it also mentions that whenever any staff members moved around the hospital, they seemed to be in a hurry or in a rush, either running or quickly walking towards a different department, which tells me that this is probably a fast-paced work environment. So coupled with long working hours that the staff is experiencing and a fast-paced work environment, it tells me that there's likely stress and tension, and it already sounds like a nerve-wracking environment where accidents could likely occur. The case study also shows that the insulin was packaged in a way that doesn't seem to be practical at all. For instance, for the resident anesthesiologist to administer 10 units of insulin, he would have to dilute down the high concentration that it already came in, which seems like a waste. We'll learn later that tools will be able to identify waste like these, but these are already telltale signs of this being a work environment where there is lots of room for improvement. So what do we do now? Well, the first thing that needed to be done was actually done by the team members. They stabilized the patient, and even though the resident anesthesiologist felt ashamed and questioned his ability to be a doctor at all, he still fessed up to what he did and he notified his supervisor. And that's something that's very important, as we learned in previous modules, that you have to simply fess up and admit your mistake, because sooner or later it's going to come out, and you might as well just be professional about it, because mistakes do happen. There's malpractice insurance for that. However, there does follow some sort of discipline that's to be expected. There could be legal ramifications, but either way, at least the problem is going to be dealt with, and management and everybody else involved can somehow move forward from the incident. The next thing that's very important to do is gather data. So all records, all other data that could be present, gather all the data relevant to the various processes that were involved in this problem. All that's going to give you is just increased clarity and accuracy, because we're going to be using this data to form improvement processes and new procedures and conduct reviews. So we need accurate data to go from. And our goals are going to be to improve the process that involves this problem and other sub-processes that are involved, and also improve the quality of care, because this was very irresponsible on the hospital's part. I think that this patient received very poor quality of care if something like that was so easily able to occur. Okay, where do we leave off? Here we go. Okay, so what are the tools that we're going to use? I identified several tools that would help in this case study and solve this problem, one of which being the Ishikawa diagram. I think it most accurately presents a model and a visual representation of what causes led to this effect. And so essentially this diagram is like a fishbone diagram where a horizontal line connects to an effect, and then diagonal lines connect to that horizontal line, depicting what causes and what root causes have occurred. It's a type of root cause analysis, and I believe that it was most suitable for this case study. Lean is another tool that we're going to use. It's going to be used to eliminate waste and redundancies in the process. It's developed by the Motorola company, also very useful tool to use in this case study. And finally, Six Sigma, the famed Toyota manufacturing company process improvement tool, aimed at being employee-led, using what's called DMAC. That stands for Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, and Control. And this specific tool is aimed at continuous process improvement. So here you're going to see the Ishikawa diagram that I developed for this case study. You'll see at the end the effect, which is 1,000 versus 10 units of insulin were administered to the patient. We can see how staff organization and methods and leadership all contributed to this effect. For instance, there was limited amount of people working on the staff. Workers were in a rushed environment. There was poor communication between their attending physician and anesthesiologist. The organization as a whole houses fatigued workers, poor protocols, and poor communication again. Regarding leadership, there was no leadership from the attending physician during the time of the insulin administration. There was poor direction and little support. And regarding the methods, there was complex dosing parameters that were impractical for the anesthesiologist to use, and unnecessary sub-steps in the terms of needing to further dilute the concentration to measure out the 10 units. And there was no organization or check system that could have prevented this before he actually went and followed through with administering the solution to the patient. Now, Lean aims at eliminating waste. So for instance, if the insulin came in a more suitable and more practical dosage or in concentration, then perhaps we wouldn't need to have had unnecessary sub-steps. So in this case, Lean's approach would be able to eliminate that, reduce redundancy, and remove unnecessary tasks, and Pokeyoke, which is called mistake proofing. And this is where the attending physician could have used a mechanism or use a protocol to where he would just simply double check the dosage, get a second set of eyes on the measurement, and that way they would just have another step that would mistake proof or catch this mistake before it had occurred. Six Sigma is a process improvement tool, uses the acronym DMAIC, which again stands for Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, and Control. It's an ongoing process improvement tool, and it also improves quality. So this is one tool that I also thought was relevant, because if this happened once, it's not going to be enough to just simply solve this particular situation. We're going to have to move forward and continue to improve processes. It looks like this hospital has much room for improvement, so this is something that needs to be dealt with and implemented as not just a temporary solution, but as a permanent solution that checks and balances itself and makes sure that something like this does not happen again. My conclusion is that using these tools to analyze, measure, improve, and control these processes, and specifically the process of miscalculating insulin, or rather calculating it correctly, the hospital will improve their process. After they diagram everything out with all stakeholders. They will be able to see which areas are going to need improvement, what can be done to improve those processes and sub-processes. Ultimately, they're going to improve the process overall, and the risk of repeating the problem is going to be decreased. You also have continued improvement set in stone, so where now, from this point forward, there's going to be ongoing need for continued review, observation, research to point something out, some deficiency or some quality improvement that can be done before a mistake arises, and then it's a necessity to make those improvements. And quality improvement also increases as a result. If you're going to be more detailed in the procedures and processes, then patients are not going to experience this type of irresponsibility in care. Therefore, using all of these tools, this hospital will be able to improve its quality as it decreases its rate or risk of repeating such problems as miscalculating the insulin. Thank you very much.